Kevin Feige, you must have been really fed up. Fed up with all those entitled fans that constantly nag that Marvel Studio doesn't take risk. He did give us movies that had a talking raccoon and a walking tree, but still, we nag. He did give us a movie about a sorcerer and one about an African king, but still, the fandom complained. It's all the same. It's the MCU formula. Even after Endgame, you could hear it was all too safe. Even if he did kill off the biggest male and female character in the franchise, it was still all just fan service and more of the same. Well, that ended last Friday in 20 minutes after the first episode of WandaVision. It's an argument no one ever needs to have again. Thank you, Mr. Feige, on behalf of all true MCU fans. Hello and welcome to the Review of Champions. Today we are going to talk about episode 3 of WandaVision, currently streaming on Disney+. Before we begin, I would like to invite all who are listening in or watching us to join our community. Go to our forum on Sakaar, make an account, chat us up, and if you are willing, you can be on the podcast or review yourself. We are open to anyone and would love to see you there. We will throw some details in the description below where you can find us. Well, let me introduce today's panel. First up, our producer, Mr. R.R.R. Stanton. Second, we have Shadowbiz. Lord Deathman is here. And last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Taylor first. That being said, episode 3 of WandaVision shows Wanda and Vision talking to their doctor because Wanda got pregnant, as we saw in the ending of episode 2. And the pregnancy is going at a bit of a fast rate. In fact, the doc claims she's 4 months pregnant, while the conception was actually last night, according to Vision. Pregnancy continues to go very fast, which leads to all kinds of complications during the episode. Now, we're going to take a deeper dive into the episode and we're going to talk spoilers. So if you haven't seen the episode, go do that first and then come back to watch our review. Well, I would like to give the word to our first panel member, and that's Mr. R.R.R. Stanton. Can you tell me something about what you thought about this episode? And, well, focus a little bit on the performances of the main cast. Paul Bettany, Elizabeth Olsen, Teyonah Parris, and the story. Well, basically what's going on.
Absolutely. First, I just want to reiterate or double down on something I said last week, that TV is the absolute perfect format for this show, and I believe it's going to be for a lot of the Disney Plus MCU shows. I've defined it on the site, and I'll just do it officially here, as like ordering a comic book series. So you might have these huge big events that you follow. Maybe it was Secret Invasion, maybe it was Civil War from the comics. And then you decided to go and order Captain America as an ongoing series. And this is like watching those little mini-series or character-focused ongoing issues. So I really love that we're getting a lot of detail into what it's like to be Wanda and Vision. So I think it's great. In terms of acting, these guys are hitting the entire spectrum, man. I mean, I think it's great. They go from like, really happy-go-lucky and silly to thoughtful. So one of my favorite moments in this episode, which was a really key moment towards the end, spoilers, where Wanda gets told or reminded about Pietro's death. And at that moment, for both the fans and Wanda simultaneously, you're reminded that, yeah, this is in the MCU. As wacky as things have been and as different, as you mentioned during your opening, as things have been, this is very definitely in the MCU. Everybody, Paul Bettany, Elizabeth Olsen, the entire cast is really playing around with this whole thing, but you feel it when it gets serious. You have fun when it's fun. You feel it when it gets serious, and I think they're doing a fantastic job across the board. There's a few things that really stood out to me in this episode. One of them was Wanda's ability to bring things to life, and you see this a couple of times. The butterflies in the Babymobile, suddenly they start fluttering and they fly away, and Wanda's apparently subconsciously sort of made this happen. Perhaps a little more famously, the stork that suddenly starts walking through the room, that came out of the painting she had done on the wall. And then it made me wonder about her getting pregnant. So here's the idea. Both the stork and the butterflies came from objects that already existed. So, where do these kids come from exactly? I'm starting to wonder if there's some sort of entity that they were derived from. I don't know if that's the case or not, but it did make me wonder, like, what the function of these kids might be. And we started talking last week about how there's a couple of different powers at play here. We know that Sword is monitoring this. We know that Wanda and Vision and perhaps some other characters are kind of caught up in this reality. And is there somebody else kind of guiding this? I'm not quite sure exactly what may be going on yet, but we see Agnes outside, and we see her with Herb hanging out by the fence, which he is quite awkwardly just started sawing into for some mysterious reason. Not quite sure what's going on there, but they are both clearly aware of some kind of, something's going on here. They both seem aware that Geraldine is from the outside. They both alert Vision to this. And then they sort of try to play it off. But the fact that Herb was aware of it makes me wonder who else is also aware of this. Like, were the Hearts, or were they just playing along in the first episode?
Wow.
Or were they actually guided in some other direction by Wanda? Or did they just realize that they had to suddenly sink back in and play this part? I'm just wondering, like, how many people are aware of this and are influencing what's going on with her. And it started to make me wonder if somebody wants her kids, somebody's using her kids, somebody is possessing her kids. I'm not really sure what's going on there, but I feel like they're going to play a pretty big part in the end. I think that's all I got for right now. I want to let everybody else talk about it, but those are just some simmering mysteries that I'm really curious about.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit later about, it was one of my questions for another panel member about the behavior of the neighbors, but we will get to that a little bit further. Lord Deathman, what did you think about this episode? And there was something that annoyed me a bit, and that was the super speed of Vision. I don't think he has that power. Does he have it in the comics? And I had a thought maybe Wanda was projecting her brother into him at that particular time. What do you think?
Wow. Well, first I'll start off by just saying hello to everyone out there at Sakaar, and hello to all of the panelists. Thanks for having me on the show today. My favorite part about episode 3 of WandaVision, surprisingly, is the title, Now in Color. I really think that just is so clever, not just because the show turns into color and moves into the 70s with the Brady Bunch sort of metaphor, but also that you're getting more color sort of, so to speak, metaphorically in the story. Bettany and Olsen continue to kill it on multiple levels. I just love the fact that they're acting, and the show, the way it's structured, is just so layered. It is like nested Russian dolls in terms of the subtext of what's going on the outside, what's happening on the sitcom level, and even when they have to sort of break out of the sitcom to have one of those more eerie moments, one of those more sinister moments, the acting continues to be fantastic. But much like yourself, I just have nothing but praise for the series. I think it's just a really brave, risky move for Marvel to be doing this. I've seen a lot of people criticize it on the level of it. Oh, is this all it is? Is it a sitcom? When do we get to the fisticuffs and the beat 'em up? I know that stuff's coming, guys, but hang in there and try to be in the moment for the ride on this, because this is really something special. So, but much like yourself, I did find myself being somewhat annoyed by the articulation of not just Vision's powers, but Wanda's powers as well. And always coming from the perspective of the source material, always sort of going back to that to sort of ground myself. For those who don't know, the Scarlet Witch in the comic books has always had a mix of different powers. She is a mutant who is born with the ability to affect probability, I think, in the most clearest articulation of her powers. And a lot of people think they understand what that might mean. But the best analogy that I could make is that if you were to take 100 bricks and throw them up into the air and have them fall exactly into the configuration of the Empire State Building, the odds of that happening would be 1 in 1 billion, right? Or 1 in 1 zillion. But her mutant power is the ability to make something as far-fetched as that into 1 in 1. So not only is it the ability to manipulate probability, but by extension, she can just change the nature of reality by making very improbable events a one-in-one occurrence. And that I always thought was really cool about her power set. But it gets complicated in the comic books by the occult layer of her powers. So she is also a witch. She's trained under Agatha Harkness and Doctor Strange, and her powers sort of allow her to bridge the gap between science and magic, turning her into one of the most formidable powerhouses in the universe, in the Marvel universe, when you're just speaking strictly about someone's power set and power levels. So I think they're blending that together in WandaVision, magic and the science. I'm like, how could she make plastic butterflies sort of turn into real life entities that are breathing and flying around and have a will of their own, right? That's almost godlike. When we turn to Vision, just for a second to look at his power set, the Vision is an android, or a synthezoid, as us comic book nerds would say. In the comic books, he's not necessarily a mechanical being that has like gears and springs and all that kind of stuff inside of him. He's actually an organic being that's just made out of synthetic materials. And he's been highly engineered for efficiency and enhanced compute power and all of those kinds of things. His primary power set is the ability to change his density at will, to become completely intangible, like a ghost, as we've seen in the movies, and move through solid objects, or to become so super dense as to increase his own physical strength and to reduce your ability to move him or affect him. So when you look at what's happening in WandaVision, he manifests super speed, and Wanda again is turning things from inanimate objects into real life objects. And for a while I was like, okay, this doesn't jibe with the comic book logic. I'm rubbing my temples as a comic book fan. I'm annoyed. But then I thought about it, and I think in the context of the sitcom world, on that level, the articulation of their powers is kind of meant to sort of reflect the silly unreality of the world. So the fact that the Vision is moving at super speed, it feels like the type of superpower that someone would put into a sitcom, right? It, like having him be intangible, moving through walls, or feats of super strength. Even if they had that kind of thing in there, I doubt that they would go to great lengths to explain it or put logic behind it. And I think it's the same thing that's happening for Wanda. And I also wanted to say that a lot of the things that you might think that Wanda is doing in this episode, her kids are actually doing it. The way her coat keeps changing on her, she seems to have no control, and she's completely surprised by the idea that the coach that she that when Geraldine walked in, she was wearing, now got turned into a raincoat and then into a fur coat. I think that was trying to tell us that the kids are doing things. She's completely surprised when the butterflies come to life. She's like, oh, I didn't realize I'd done that. And that's because she didn't do it. One of the children in her womb is actually completing these actions. And I thought that was really nice. That's a deep dive for the fans. So I was right there with you with some of the issues around the super speed and the power articulation, but I don't think we can use this unreal environment to the letter of the law in terms of how their powers actually work. We know that the Vision doesn't just kind of twist his head or shake his head and then suddenly go from being the Vision to Paul Bettany, right? There's probably a bit more of a metamorphosis or a restructuring of matter that happens. So don't know that we were meant to take that kind of stuff literally, but giving this episode a grade for me, it's an 8 out of 10. I've been giving all of the episodes an 8 on my 1 to 10 scale, and this one continues to be at a substantially high quality level. The reason I'm not going to 9s or 10s is I do feel that the mystery behind what's happening is a little vexing, and I do want to get to getting some more information about this, and I can hardly contain my excitement. But I've been forcing myself to kind of stay in the moment and really enjoy the craft and what they're doing with the show. So that's my take on it.
Excellent answer, as always. And yeah, I actually also enjoy the setup of the show, the sitcom aspect of it. I think it's brilliant, and I think it's something Marvel does. Now they take risks and they show they can do anything. Talking about sitcoms, Taylor, what do you think about this show? Did you pick up any Easter eggs, Marvel related or even other show related, when you were watching this episode?
I thought this was an excellent episode, and I'll get to rating of the show overall here in a minute. Obviously, the sitcom influence is all over the place. The biggest sitcom influence in this one is, of course, the Brady Bunch, starting with the opening credits, which were very influenced by the Brady Bunch, except you had the hexagons instead of squares. Again, those hexagons keep coming back. But it was not just a Brady Bunch opening. It combined it. It combined the Brady Bunch type of opening credits with another technique of opening credits that was very popular starting in the 60s and through the 70s and continues to some degree today. And that is the technique of filming specific scenes, usually outdoors, for the opening credit scenes, as opposed to taking snippets from episodes and putting those as the opening credit scenes. So they had all those scenes of them having fun and eating ice cream in the town square and everything. And again, that's a technique that's widely used. And again, it was very popular in the 70s. Just some examples of shows that I thought of: the Doris Day Show, The Odd Couple, Eight is Enough, That Girl, Mary Tyler Moore Show. Step by Step, which was a show in the 90s, did that to very memorably. And a show that I'm going to get to here in just a second, a show called Angie, which is from the late 70s, early 80s. And then, of course, inside the house, very much the decor and the layout of the house was very much influenced by the Brady Bunch. Also, when Vision is practicing changing diapers on the doll, that doll was actually a doll called Kitty Carryall, and that was Cindy's doll in the Brady Bunch in season 1. It was the exact same toy doll. So that's another Easter egg for the Brady Bunch. But why I pointed out Angie is because Vision, his hairstyle and his clothes, that was not Mike Brady. Okay, to me, that was much more reminiscent of the role that Robert Hayes played in the show Angie, in the way the hair was done and the way he dressed. So it was kind of a blending of different sitcoms and the different, multiple sources, which is what I like, as opposed to Marvel saying, this is the Brady Bunch episode, that's all we're going to do, everything's going to be Brady Bunch. They actually put in a lot of other stuff. There's still a lot of Bewitched going on there. And this next one, which kind of follows up on what Arch was talking about, and I thought of it, and I thought maybe it's only in my own head. But there was a show in the late 60s, early 70s called Nanny and the Professor. And without going into huge detail about it, professor with 3 kids loses his wife. A British nanny comes in and moves in with them to help raise family. She has magical powers. Her powers are very subtle. She doesn't wiggle her nose or blink her eyes or wave her hands around. Stuff just happens. Like Arch was talking about, improbable things. Any super coincidence that needs to happen happens when she's around. And in some parts in that show, to the point of reality changes. And again, it's a perfectly funny, fine family sitcom show. There's nothing scary about it, but with one twist of the finger, you could turn it into a horror show. Because, like, for example, in the very first scene of the show, you're at an airport. She walks up to the customs desk. Customs officer says, "Where did you come from?" She said, "I came from England." "How?" "I flew." "Well, that's impossible. The last flight from England was yesterday afternoon, and the next one's not until," and he starts opening his book looking for the next flight from England, and then suddenly there's an announcement: Flight 32 from England has just arrived. And so did she just create a plane full of people that didn't exist in reality, or did she just somehow change reality so that a plane that did exist arrived at a different time than it was expected to arrive? And then the kind of things like we're talking about with the butterflies coming to life and the stork and so on. For some reason, that just reminded me of Nanny and the Professor. Maybe it's just me. Maybe Marvel didn't even think about that. A couple other things. Now, of course, the tropes. Virtually every classic sitcom in which a child is born has the birth of the child episode where everything gets all zany. Every sitcom that had a supernatural being has an episode where they lose control of their powers to hilarious effect, either because they're pregnant or because they have an allergy or something causes them to lose control of their powers, and trying to hide that from all the normal people creates humor. The strange animal loose in the house that you're trying to hide from your guests is another trope that is shown up multiple times. I think the Brady Bunch had one where there was a goat in the house, and so on. Now, as far as Marvel nuggets, I didn't really see them specifically, but I'm not as familiar with the comics themselves as some people. That stork, I didn't think of this, but I actually saw someone else say that stork was Mephisto manifesting as an animal for some reason. And the reasoning some people gave was, well, Wanda tried to make it disappear, and there was a puff of red smoke, but the stork was still there.
Oh.
And then the stork tried to eat the woman's pants, which had pictures of fish on the pants. Fish is a symbol of Jesus. Was she sent in like Jesus to save them, and the devil is trying to stop her from saving them. Getting in the weeds there. It's a theory that's out there. I'm not sure if I go along with it. Sometimes a fish is just a fish, but as far as other Marvel stuff, I'm not sure. Exactly. And I think, guys, as the show goes on, I'm not sure we're going to get the answers to all of these questions that we have. Some of these questions may only exist in our heads, and others, I say, we may not get the answers to them, or we may have to wait for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness to get the final answers on some of these things. The last thing I want to talk about, of course, is the incredible ending of the episode, where we see that obviously Sword has sent Geraldine, or Monica Rambeau, into this bubble, this world, to somehow try to help Wanda or achieve whatever Sword's goals are. And we can see that she was not completely within her faculty. Her memory was gone too. So this bubble, this world, has power to affect people from the outside when they come in, as well as the people who are already inside. However, the kids and Wanda talking about her twin brought back some memories in Monica, and then she remembered about Pietro and Ultron and the world outside. And obviously the neighbors are worried about that, because at times, obviously, they also have memories, or they have some awareness, some level of awareness of what's going on, and they knew that she was from the outside. And if she was any threat to whoever or whatever, whether it's Wanda or someone controlling Wanda that's creating this, it could be a whole lot of danger for them. So that threat caused a reaction in Wanda, and Monica was sent outside into where Sword is all set up with their command post and all of their assets, trying to do whatever it is. We don't know yet what they are trying to do exactly with this situation, but that's where they are. And that's where the episode ends, with the song playing, Daydream Believer by the Monkees, which just adds to the entire magic of the show, because that is a magic song if you've never actually heard it. So those are my thoughts on it. And as far as overall on the series itself, the first two episodes, after the first two episodes, I gave the series a 10 out of 10. As of the third episode, I give the series an 11 out of 10. We'll see what happens going forward.
Well, there you have it, people. Taylor taking us to school and pulling a Taylor to add to that. Excellent answer, as always. Biz, I also want to hear your thoughts, of course. And, well, let's talk about this ending, because that changed the whole show. What did you take from this ending? How the neighbors behaved? Do you have any thoughts that have not been shared yet?
Well, before I get into that, the ending and the neighbors, I did want to touch on with Taylor first interesting theory that he found online, where with the stork possibly being Mephisto. because because Mephisto obviously is like the MCU's devil, like he's like I'm guessing he's omniscient and has all kinds of great powers. I'm not entirely specifically like sure what his powers are, but I know he's powerful. But the thing is, when the Stalker was like reaching for the fish on the lady's pants, it could also be like symbolic for, because he's the devil, like he likes playing tricks as well. Like that could be like symbolic for playing with this food, and playing with this food would be Wanda. Wanda would be the food. So yeah, like, I thought that was a pretty interesting theory. Now as for the neighbors, like I thought that was really funny when the neighbor was just like using that hedge trim or whatever it was, that garden tool, that machine. It was just like cutting through the hedge, and then it's like, and then just cutting through the brick wall. I'm like, wow, that's a pretty powerful garden tool. And at first I thought it was like, at first I thought he was just being a dick. Like, what are you doing? Like, he's just like, I don't care, I'll just cut through the wall too. But then I figured later on, it's like, oh, it's like a glitch in the Wanda like matrix system. But yeah, like it's interesting because I already expressed my thoughts that I think that they never finished their sentence, and then like they were giggling kind of like schoolgirls, and then Vision's like, oh, like well, what's going on, and then like, yeah, they never finished the sentence. Like I thought they were trying to say we're trapped here, but then I also had another thought where there could be that, yeah, sure, they might be real people from the real world, but they could also be like parts of Wanda's psyche, like fractured psyche, because we don't know what's going on at this point. Like, I mean, like, of course, there's a theory where Agnes is like a real character, like Agnetha Harkness, but we're still not sure. Like, the jury's still out. Like, are they real people? Are they like a part of Wanda's fractured psyche? I mean, obviously we know Geraldine is a part of Sword. Yeah, like that's all I have to say on that.
Yeah. Well, I really get that fear vibe again from Herb and Agnes as well, actually. And she was
Mm.
basically begging Herb not to spill the truth to Vision. And yeah, I had some thoughts on Wanda, and maybe we can have a little discussion about this before we close up our review. Wanda, every time something happens that she is not so happy with, she just dials the episode back a few seconds and changes what happens, or let it change what happens. We saw that in the second episode, but we saw that again in the third with Vision. And the ending also gave me a vibe that Wanda is actually very happy in the setting she is in. She has her ideal life with the man she loves. She has kids now. It's her ideal life, and now I wonder if this is because she has created this, or she has made a deal with Mephisto to create. She was asked by Sword to deal with Mephisto because she has the power set to do so. But he made a deal with her, like we discussed earlier on the board, the Faust team.
I definitely think that there's something Faustian going on, as the proverbial deal with the devil is occurring here, where they talked about a tag at one point at the end of Avengers Endgame in which Wanda was sort of going to be sneaking into some sort of a facility, either a shield or sword facility, where they were holding the remains of the Vision, and that she was going to sort of just be there, and it would be implied that she was taking the remains away. And I think that a theory that I don't think is too far-fetched is that while she could have reanimated Vision to a certain extent, giving him life the way the Mind Stone did would be beyond her abilities. And making a deal with someone like Mephisto might have facilitated bringing Vision back to life. But the price to pay for that was perhaps you had to exist in this realm, where Mephisto might be feeding off of you, as Biz sort of said. So, however that plays out, whatever the details of it are, I feel that there's a Faustian bargain sort of happening inside of WandaVision. And I know everyone was sort of thrilled and relieved to see Monica get ejected out of this world and back into the real world, so that we know things are happening in the real world and all these trucks are pulling up, and we kind of know that means shield or sword. But to me, the more interesting parts about it is Wanda's reaction when she starts talking about Pietro, realizing she was a twin, when she gets upset with Geraldine for saying what she said. Not only does Olsen act all of that out very beautifully, but her reactions to that were the build up to it and how eerie it felt was really what made the episode for me, and how she responded to it. We don't even really see what she did to Geraldine, but obviously she was ejected with some force out of that particular world. So Faustian bargain definitely at play. And for the listeners out there, if you're looking for issues, I definitely think I'm narrowing down my comic book sources to the Vision and Scarlet Witch miniseries of 1985, which was the 12-issue limited series. If you can check that out on Comixology or maybe Marvel Unlimited, that's probably where you want to be reading. That's where Tommy and Billy are born. That's probably the heaviest quantity of material we have about Vision and Scarlet Witch as a couple acting as crime fighting partners together. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that scene where Wanda is questioning Geraldine / Monica was actually very well cut and edited, with the same scene where Vision is talking to Herb and Agnes outside, and it really added to the tension that was building at that actual moment. And we're going for Act 2 now. The next 3 episodes are going to be Act 2 in this 6-hour Marvel movie, and this editing really helped to transition Act 1 into Act 2. Arch, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just to follow up a little bit on what we've sort of been discussing here. A lot of it's going to really come down to what the precipitating factors were. So, is Vision being worked on or monitored, his body anyway, or to what extent is he actually functioning? Maybe they're trying to reboot him. We don't know exactly, but to whatever extent that is going to change the scenario a little bit. So, for instance, did Wanda come back in game and just after the final battle, she moves off to this little town and she creates this completely false reality on her own? Or is this part of some sort of larger program that's going on with a sword observed experiment on Vision, and she volunteered to be a part of this? Is she in it because she made a deal with Mephisto, if Mephisto's in this, just hypothetically? Or did Mephisto figure out that this was going on, there is this alternate reality, and then he actively went in to try to take advantage of the situation? Maybe he can't do it directly, and he's using an emissary like Agnes to manipulate events in it. Like, so for instance, we're not quite sure, but was Agnes in this town when this started happening, or did she sense this going on, realize they could use this situation to some ends of their own, and she's trying to manipulate it? Those types of questions are ones that I think are the really sort of deeper mystery here of who is manipulating what. But one other, actually 2 other things now that I think about it. Agnes had a fun little line where she said, after the power was going out, that Ralph looks better in the dark. Not quite sure what that means, but it makes Ralph sound a little bit sinister, perhaps. And then also a cool little factoid: when Monica did get ejected, she showed up, of course, and we saw this in the trailer, in her 70s clothes. So it leads us to suspect that anything that is created in this reality can then leave the reality and be real in reality. So can she completely manifest anything she wants, and then as soon as it steps out of her bubble, it is in our world regardless of what it is? I don't know, but it looks like that might be the case, which leads to some interesting possibilities.
Or it's just an opening in the multiverse. Taylor.
Yeah, I mean, there's really so much to unpack here, and it's all speculation at this point. But not only, did Monica get ejected in her 70s garb, but I mean, this tells us that they have a way of putting people into this reality from the outside. Sword apparently has a way of inserting people into this, inserting agents. Um, that seems strange to me. How are they doing that? Unless they are they controlling it, like Arch said. But as far as the Faustian bargain goes, I think, and again, this is just my speculation, I see it as similar to what happened in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, where Ego used Peter Quill's grief to trick him into helping him, into using his power and his ability to help him meet his goals. So I think, maybe she didn't make a bargain, but I think she was under a spell when she agreed to that bargain. I don't think she fully agreed to. I don't think it was her idea. I don't think she leaped at the chance. I think she was in a state of grief, and Mephisto or whoever used that to twist her mind, to make her agree to whatever this is, and to use her powers to accomplish this false reality of whatever it is. And she's kind of, I mean, for lack of a better word, she's kind of like doped up in there. She's being fed this beautiful life that she wanted forever, and in return, someone is sucking her powers or getting something out of it.
Yeah, that's an excellent parallel, Tal. I wouldn't have been thought of that. Yeah, I'd just like to add, like with what Arch was saying before about like the 70s garb when she was thrown out. The thing is, I'd just like to say that it's obvious that Sword is observing the situation, well, on the ground, so to speak. She could have just easily walked in with 70s clothing.
That's certainly possible. I almost mentioned that, but yeah, that could easily be the case. It just makes me wonder, if she wasn't. Well, here's the thing. She at least appears to have been mentally affected. Taylor, I believe, mentioned this earlier, where she was reminded by Wanda that she had a twin, and then like it looked like only then did she start realizing the events of Ultron. Now, maybe she was just playing it off, and Geraldine thought that at that moment, since Wanda suddenly realized that Pietro was a real thing, that was her moment. She could have started talking about Pietro and try to bring Wanda back to actual reality, and it just didn't work out for her. Or Geraldine may have been under the delusion at that point and been reminded herself, and it didn't work out for her. I'm not convinced. I don't really know. Yeah, she definitely could have walked into the delusion with the 70s clothes on and been thrown out, and it means absolutely nothing for being able to leave it. But if Wanda did create the clothes on her, then it creates a whole new circumstance.
Taylor, you had another add-on?
Yeah, that really raises a question. I didn't even think about that. We did see Geraldine in the previous episode in the black and white with different hair and different clothes. And Agnes mentioned Geraldine doesn't have a home. So where does Geraldine go when she's not visiting Wanda and Vision? Is she going back out and changing her clothes and coming back in to meet whatever they're viewing on their screen at that time? Hey, they've changed to 70s clothes. We need to put you in some 70s clothes and put you back in. I don't know.
Lord Deathman.
Very quickly, just wanted to comment on the character of Geraldine and her level of awareness. So I think when you're looking at all of the world, all of the people in this world, there are varying degrees of awareness of what's happening. The neighbors tend to be more sinister because they seem to know more about what's going on. And I think a character like Geraldine, who is probably inserted, Geraldine is actually Monica, as we know. So when she gets inserted by Sword, I think she's able to resist the simulation's ability to sort of affect her completely and submerge her in the fantasy, which is why she's able to sort of mention Pietro and Ultron, because she's not fully immersed into this thing. But it manages to influence everyone on some level. But I do think that there's sort of like various levels of how far embedded you are into Wanda's web, if you will.
I think the only individual who's not aware of what's going on, at least not, he has his questions and doubts, is Vision. Vision is the only one who has no clue what's going on. I think Wanda knows. She doesn't want to know, but she knows. And the neighbors, they all know, at least to some degree, and they are scared. That is the vibe I got in the second episode. That's the vibe I got in the third episode. And the only one who is not fully aware of, or he knows something is off, but he don't know what, is Vision. And we are Vision in this, as
Right.
viewers, we are Vision, and we follow this mystery through the eyes of Vision. Lord Deathman, you had something to add on this?
You beat me to it. So Vision is a proxy for us as the watcher of the show. I just wanted to say that, but you excellently articulated that. We are Vision when you watch WandaVision.
Yeah, that also adds some depth to the title of the show itself. Actually, we are we watch WandaVision, if you know what I mean. Instead of television, it's WandaVision. Well, I think that will conclude our review for episode 3 this week. Thank you, and see you next week for our episode 4 review. Bye.